Today, I am delighted to be joined by Kevin Haynes. Kevin is Head of Insight at GiffGaff, a brand known for doing right by its members and so sometimes doing things really quite differently. And he brings that same spirit to Insight. He's clear thinking, no nonsense, and always up for a conversation about what is coming next. But what really stands out is how he balances that drive for what's new with like a real appreciation for what's working right now. I've seen him be such a natural celebrator of great work wherever it comes from. So, Kevin, I'm delighted to have you today. Welcome.
Right. It's great to be here, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. I'm not sure I can quite live up to some of that, but very kind of you. I look forward to the
Well,
chat.
I think it's such a rare quality. I definitely see, particularly kind of how you shout about things on LinkedIn. How I know I've known you've taken part in other podcasts. How you react to taking part in this one. I think that balance between being kind of hungry for what's next, what's new, and sort of questioning things, challenging things, but still remembering to sort of shout about and celebrate what's good today. I do think is a tricky balance to get right. So it's one of the things that struck me about you.
Thank you.
So let's dive straight in, Kevin. I'm having a great time having some brilliant conversations with people. And I guess something that unites them all is they're all sort of, have stellar careers at the top of their game. There's lots of things that they could do, lots of skills, lots of things they could turn their hand to. And I'm really curious, the world of insight is an interesting one. Holding the mirror up to businesses is a challenge. Why do you bother doing it when you could do anything?
Gosh, again, Laura, I don't think I could do anything, but not quite so multi-skilled. But I guess for me, I thought about this a lot actually, and I was like, this is a really really interesting question. But I don't really I love business and I love how business works. But I think the thing that I'm really passionate about and I'm really intrigued about is um, consumer psychology, how people think and work, and how they make the decisions that they do. And I think when you sort of love business and the art of the deal, and but also love consumer psychology, the sort of the intersection of those, sort of the Venn diagram, the intersection of that Venn diagram is something about. I don't want to leave the decisions to people who think they know what the customer wants or needs. And I think there's a huge gap between what people assume about customers and about people, and the reality. And I think that gap costs businesses millions. Poor decision making, decisions that frustrate customers, and don't deliver great business outcomes. And I think it's quite exciting to be in a position to be able to close that gap, and step in and sort of provide that, be that as best I can, that voice of the customer in the business.
Yeah, that empathy gap, I think, is such a challenge because there are so many moments, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of these, whereby people are almost slightly tricked by that gap. They do feel in touch. Maybe they, I don't know, have people in their personal life who give them sort of inspiration. They might be recalling like their teenager, their partner. They might have done a little bit of looking on social media. For certain brands, they might have been out in store or experienced things. But opening people's minds to you're seeing kind of that much, you need to see this much is a real challenge.
Absolutely. The classic example of one, I mean, probably pretty much in every single meeting, interaction I am in at work, there's inevitably somebody with an anecdote. It's my job, I guess, to sort of broaden people's horizons, to make them see another point of view, and a different perspective. And part of that is gathering more than just a sample of a couple of anecdotes, and being able to really influence and impact decision making in a positive way.
So your career to date so far, Kevin, I'm really interested to know who you've kind of met along the way, whose words maybe still rumble around your mind, or when you're coming to make a decision or trying to move something forward, you still think of maybe their ways of working or their advice or something that they taught you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so important to find people in your career who I think are much smarter than you. And I've been really lucky that I've pretty much worked with people who are just a whole lot smarter than I am. Uh, and that has pushed me to work better, smarter, and to sort of aim high, I guess. And I think that that's crucial. I sort of I think, there are a couple of names that come immediately to mind when you say, is there anybody who rattles around in your head? Absolutely, yes, there are. And one person was my first boss, Milani van Roy, from South Africa, where I started my career. And I still, to this day, I think I can't think of anybody who commanded a room quite like Milani did. Just an absolute presence and just able to sort of wrap an audience around her finger. It was just a phenomenal thing to see. And to this day, when I present and I'm thinking of presenting, quite often I sort of think about, what would Milani do? How would she approach this? She was really, really kind of quite influential in the early part of my career. I think later on, somebody I would call out is Liz Beeson. I worked for her at Twinings. Just absolute stickler for the detail, and really wanted to know, how did this methodology work? How is this agency going to do that project? Who's doing what? What's happening where? What's growing? What's declining? Get the spreadsheets out. What's moving? What's not? But her attention to detail was phenomenal, and it really taught me that the success is in the detail. I think quite often it comes down to, how did you ask that question in the survey? How big was the sample size when you've cut the data 3 times over by 3 different demographic groups? How big is that sample? So I think Liz still, every time I think about, do I have to read another questionnaire? Yes, I do, because I've got to know what's in that questionnaire. Ask the agency, be curious about what's in the methodology. And finally, there's a third voice that rings in my head, is Jacinda Norman, who I worked with at Waitrose, and she really taught me the power of humor and just having loads of fun at work, and how you can be fun, you can be a little bit silly, and that's fun. And actually, that's great. It's part of creating that resilience to sort of overcome the challenges that you have at work. So I think, in a funny way, I sort of thought about what was common across these 3 people, and I realized they frustrated me as much as they inspired me. But it's because they really challenged me. And I think it's quite often learning and sort of sharpening yourself comes from when you're overruled, when you're slightly ignored, when you're kind of just pushed that much, much harder. And I think that helps you really work differently and sharpen your argument and think about what you're gonna do. So those are some there's some names for you, some names from the long distance past of my career, who just, to this day, they rattle around in my head.
I can really hear your sort of observational nature coming out there. So many of those people, it's kind of watching what they do and then sort of trying to embody parts of it, take some kind of hints and direction from what you see. I think so interesting. And as you're speaking, it reminds me of another podcast guest, Ryan from Wreck-It, and he talked about the importance of playing a stronger opponent. Whatever you're playing, if you play a weaker opponent, it kind of throws your game. So that recognition of, actually, if this is feeling slightly itchy, slightly uncomfortable, and as you say, maybe a little bit frustrating at times, you could be really onto something. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really interested, Kevin, head of insight at GiffGaff, big job, lots, I think, to influence. Lots. I'm sure there's lots to do. What are some of your secrets in terms of influencing, making sure the business is really kind of thinking consumer?
I think the truth is, there is no secret. There is no magic bullet for overcoming and getting people to think about customers. I would say, you know, it's trial and error. It's a lot of making a lot of mistakes. And so I'd sort of say to anybody listening, don't worry about secrets, don't worry about special methodologies, just do it. Kind of just start, even if it's a bit messy. And I think often the best things in business are messy. They don't make sense, they don't work the first time, but just start. And I think so. I probably have circled around to giving a bit of a secret, a bit of a truth, but I kind of think there isn't there's no perfect methodology, there's no perfect way of doing things. I think just start, give it a go, and if anything, have an intention to remove the idea that customers are something abstract. And I think really think about, how do you help people understand their customers the way they might understand their friends and family? So you spoke earlier, Laura, about, sometimes you get those anecdotes from stakeholders where they go, oh, I've got a teenager and he or she does X, Y, Z. Well, that's what you want to imbue on people through customer obsession, is that sense that I know the customer. What they should be saying is not referencing their teenager, but saying, hey, I know Joe, who's in segment X. Joe's important customer to us, and this is what he likes and this is what he doesn't like. And I think that's almost what you want, is people to sort of feel that, and that comes through a bit of trial and error. And I think the biggest mistake I probably see is, and particularly from, and I'm going to pick on insight teams, is an obsession with controlling the narrative. I think it's our role as insight professionals and insight teams to create access to customers and to create the right environment for good conversations, good insight from customers in all its various forms, be it face-to-face or survey or various, regardless of the methodology. But I think you've got to be quite brave as an insight team to step back and say, hey, I'm going to let you have the conversation. I'm giving you access to the customer, and you need to have the conversation with them and find out what they want and what they need, and get to know them, get to really know them and understand them as people. I think that's important. Probably a bit a really waffly answer.
No, I don't think so at all.
Yeah. I don't want people to obsess about, there's no perfect way. Just go get some customers into your office. Even if that feels scary, it's good.
Yeah. And I really like the two big things you reflect on there. One, that messy is good. that means you're sort of pushing yourself and be a bit sort of like gracious with yourself about the fact that it might be a bit messy. And I think when you're thinking about, don't worry so much about controlling the narrative, I do think that is a really powerful message. And I think that it is something that runs through inside people's heads a lot, I think. Sometimes we would experience, you might get two really conflicting pieces of data. Well, actually, there comes a point where you think, well, if there's conflicting, the segment in between there is where the magic is where the opportunity is. And I think that sometimes, we fall into that trap of wanting to control it too much, cut the data one more time, keep looking one more time, and actually just go.
Yeah, or step back and just think about, why might there be a conflict? Just think, and the more familiarity you have with your customers, and not just the familiarity in terms of your product and your category, but the more you really know them as people, their wider lives and their wider context, I think that's sometimes where the magic happens, that you spoke about. Because when you understand them as people in the way that you understand your friends and family, you're better at kind of going, oh, I understand why there might be a contradiction there. I think I might understand that actually there might be some other priorities or financial constraints that these people have in their lives that maybe, kind of lead to this odd decision making, what appears odd decision making, and I think that, yeah. And so that's the thing, like, just start, give it a go, don't worry about it being messy, and just don't overly control the narrative. Let the narrative go where it needs to go. Let the conversation go where it needs to go with customers. Explore and have a little bit of fun with it.
So, Kevin, I'd like to think a little bit sort of further into the future. People in roles like yours, people in businesses really trying to champion consumer, or indeed the kind of agencies that are supporting those people. How do we win? What are some of the either mindsets or approaches or even kind of mantras people need to ensure we keep winning?
Well, I mean, for agencies, I'd say give me good prices, that, deep discounts, or that's a good way to win. But no, I'm joking, obviously. I think, winning, I think, is the wrong thing to focus on. And this is a bit controversial, but I would focus on failing, because I think that leads to that sort of leads to sustainable success. And I'll sort of explain. I think my philosophy is that if you're winning all the time and if you're succeeding, you're probably not trying hard enough, and you might not be taking enough risk, or as much risk as you could be taking, and you can probably push yourself a little bit more. So I'm a natural skeptic because I'm in insights, but I think whenever I see things where there's success, green on the dashboard continuously for quarter after quarter, I'm a bit like, probably something a bit wrong there. Either the targets are a bit too low, or, sometimes you have to understand, why are we winning all the time? We should, every now and again, you should just not quite hit that quarterly number, or achieve what you'd hope to achieve. And so I often say this to my team. I say, kind of, take risks. I want you to fail as well as succeed and win, because if you're failing, it means that you're trying. And I think that can be something that you sort of apply in any sphere in your life. I think that kind of push for discomfort, make sure you feel a bit nervous about what you're about to do. And I think that leads to long-term success. I think that's kind of what's worked for me, in a sort of an odd way, is kind of removing the worry about whether or not I'm going to win. It just, does this feel scary? Does this feel hard? If I say yes to those two things, then I'm kind of like, I'm probably in the right place. I might make people a bit uncomfortable initially, but I would hope over the long term I'll win them over, because we're doing something a bit different and a bit harder. And I think, when you sort of introduced me at the beginning, you sort of said there's this balance between the new and the different. And I think that's probably where it comes from a little bit, is this, I'll just give it a go. It's going to be messy. It's going to be messy regardless. So might as well push yourself a bit and just see what happens. Learn from what works, learn from the kind of the more traditional route, but give it a go. That's my advice.
Ring around my mind when you say that, and I really think you're sort of spot on. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of us can nod to, and we've probably seen, but to really live it and do it is a challenging thing. One thing that rings around my mind is this piece of stand-up that someone called Deborah Francis White did, and I heard kind of years ago. And she is at a comedy gig, and she says, "Who wants to come up and do some stand-up comedy?" And obviously nobody puts their hand up.
Yeah, you can feel the fear, and it wasn't even there. Yeah.
And she says, there is one room that I am in where every single person will put their hand up. They will be mega enthusiastic. And it is when I do my comedy for kids. They can't wait to have a go. And actually, if we then give everybody a go and we keep going, actually the metric of success is how many goes you got. I got 3 goes, but you only did 2 goes. And it's very, very, very different to adults. We would rather have like 1 go at stand-up comedy than have 3. But when you're trying to win and when you're playing a game, I don't know, you're at a fair or something, you're trying to shoot the ducks. Of course, you want three goes for a pound, not one go for a pound. And so I think that, like, we nod along to that, don't we? And there are so many moments where we really think it, but actually doing it when when we're confronted it in life, in our jobs, in our careers, is so much harder, I think. And so, yes, her words were sort of ringing around my mind when you were speaking just then, that we need to be a little bit more like that. Kind of, how many goes can I have, rather than, oh, I just hope we have one go and it goes very well.
Oh, I mean, that's a brilliant analogy. I'm stealing that one. I'm definitely taking that for future reference. But that, yeah, it's absolutely, be more playful, be more, that bravery is everything, I think. And I guess, like, it's interesting because you think about children, and the two things, like, kids are not embarrassed. They just give it a go. They'll, like you say, they'll just all put up their hand. Also, they're incredibly curious, and that is gold dust for an insight professional. Being in the insight world and in the industry, I think curiosity is absolutely at the heart of it. And if you want to win, be curious, because that pervades everything. Be curious about methodologies, be curious about people, be curious about your stakeholders, be curious about your customers. That is where the gold dust is. And so I like that. Laura, I'm going to definitely steal that analogy. It's got legs.
Well, it's not mine analogy, it's Deborah Francis White. She really is sort of brilliant, I think, at taking kind of moments like that and putting them into really confronting you, I think, with moments that you would nod along to it, and then when you're actually met with the high stakes, you go, no, I'll take the I'll take the previous option, please. So I'll send you that podcast. Brilliant, Kevin. I really loved chatting to you today. I think there's a real sort of freshness and almost sort of like invigorating, exhilarating sensation to enjoy it being a bit messy.
No, absolutely. But equally, Laura, it's been wonderful chatting. It's just been an absolute pleasure to share and kind of, chat about all these different topics. It's been great.
Well, it's always nice to reflect, I think. So thank you so much, Kevin, for joining me today.